welcome to another episode of Getting Off the Hamster Wheel, how to find a career that brings you joy, fulfillment, and success. My name is Karen Weeks, and today we have Stuart Roper joining us to share his story of moving from working in a call center to being a software engineer, and what he realized about his learning style and not letting yourself get stuck when you feel like there's a better path for you. So let's jump in and hear Stuart's story. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm so excited to have Stuart on with us today. We actually met over Twitter. I'm not a good person using social media, but I was like, I'm going to find a hashtag and follow it. And here we are. So I'm so excited that we got a chance to meet. So I would love to give you a chance to introduce yourself sort of at a high level, and then we'll sort of dive in.
Okay, Karen. Well, thank you very much for having me on your show. My name's Stuart Roper. I'm 39 years old. I've had quite a sort of long time in a career which I didn't really enjoy, and now I'm at a point in my life where I think I've found my sort of dream career, and it's been quite a long journey to get to there. So it's been good fun, but it's also been quite tough. So yeah, I'm now a junior software engineer at a company, and that career change has happened in the last year. But for the last kind of 6 or 7 years, I've been I'd been looking to get into that career, but it had just been finding the right, final push to get the job I wanted, really.
Well, and it's so interesting, and we'll get to this point later on, but that this was the year that you decided to make that change.
Yeah.
So let's rewind a little bit. I always ask people, because we're expected to sort of make these life decisions before we have any life experience. So
Absolutely.
When you were the age of, college age or university age,
Yeah.
what did you think you wanted to do? How did you start off your sort of adult career life?
Well, I didn't initially want to go to university, so I got a job working in a university, ironically, but not as a student. And it was around about in sort of 99, 2000. And the internet was just kind of taking off. You probably remember around about 98, 99, the internet was starting to become this big thing. So I started to sort of have an interest in that, and I started to see how it was made. And I made a decision on clearing day. So that's like the kind of day where, in England, you might have the similar thing in the US, where if people haven't got a degree and they just want to find a university, you basically just phone around universities and say, do you have any places on your course? I want to join. And so I decided pretty much on a whim that was it. I wanted to go to university, and I wanted to do sort of web design.
Okay.
Obviously my mum was quite surprised by this, so I kind of burst through the door and went, Mum, I want to go to university. And she was like, okay, well, that's fine. Just where do you want to go? So I made a phone call. I got into a course that was a multimedia technology course. So that was the kind of buzzword at the time.
Yeah.
Multimedia technology. You must have had like in Carter 95 or these kind of, CD-ROMs which had video and audio and stuff. That was multimedia, So I went along and I did the course, and it was really good. It was really what I wanted to do. It was quite a really varied course. It had sort of, web design, but graphic design as well. There's a little bit of electronics thrown in there. There was quite a few different subjects, business management. So it was a really cool, varied course, and I really enjoyed doing it. Unfortunately, right at the end of the course, with about 2 months to go, I was playing soccer and I tore my anterior cruciate ligament in my left knee.
Ooh.
And it was a real bad tear. I'd ruptured it, basically split in two. So I needed an operation. Unfortunately, the way that obviously healthcare is over here, I would have to go on a waiting list to have this operation. So I would need to wait sort of on a minimum of 6 months before I could, have this operation. So once I left university, I was kind of stuck because I wanted to apply for graduate schemes, but at the same time, I just couldn't guarantee that I could give that time to a company, because at some point I was going to go off work for 2 months and then have sort of 6 months of rehabilitation to get my knee back to where I wanted to be to carry on doing sports. So it was a bit depressing, really. So when I left university, I kind of just got into a temp job working in customer service in a share administration company, taking telephone calls over the phone. And I think the first mistake I kind of made there really was that I just got used to having money without, and it kind of took my eyes off what I really wanted to do. And at the same time, I was, waiting for this operation. So yeah, it was a strange time. It was a bit of a downer, really, because I wanted to do something else, but because of the situation I was in, I couldn't, really. I personally didn't feel I could give a company the best if I then turned around and went, well, I'm going to go off for 8 months, to get my knee reconstructed. So,
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I mean, it definitely is hard because, I think these are a lot of the stories is that everybody, people think they're going one direction and then something happens. Because at
yeah.
the end of the day, our career is just part of our life and other pieces of our life can intervene.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was, as I said, it was a difficult time at that point. But I eventually had the operation, and then I came back, and then because I'd kind of had a bit of a downer, and because I felt, I was in my early 20s. I was like 23 years old. I thought, well, one of my friends had gone to travel around Australia for a year, so I thought, well, I'm still at a time where I haven't really got a lot of responsibility, so I'm gonna go away for 6 months. So I went away to Southeast Asia for 6 months in 2006.
Wow.
Came back, didn't have any money, and then second mistake I made was I needed a temp job, but I knew the job before would still have a place open for me. So I went back there just again thinking, well, this is just going to be a temporary thing. And I'm sure you probably hear many stories of people who say, well, this is going to be a temporary thing. And then before you know it, you've been in a job for, 2 or 3 years, and you think, well, where's that time gone? And that pretty much very much was where I was at. I think one of the things that plagued me in my career, certainly at that time in my life, was I just didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I think that can always be a problem. Well, it's a massive problem if you're not really sure what you want to do. I knew I probably still wanted to do the kind of web design, and I still wanted to get into tech. But I felt by that point, because I'd been out of it for a couple of years, the technology had kind of moved on. So it was a bit of a bad time, really. But the job was okay. It wasn't particularly stressful at that point, and that people liked me there. So when an opportunity came up, I decided I wanted to become a manager in that job, because partly I just it was a bit more money, and it was it would give me some experience of people management and a bit of extra responsibility. So I did feel like, although I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, I knew that my career was important for me to kind of sort of move it on a little bit.
Well, and I think a lot of times too, if people don't have either a compelling event, like destroying your knee, or hopefully not in a negative way like that, or they sort of have a revelation around, oh, I learned about this thing and now I'm really excited about that. It's so easy just to kind of keep going. You get up, you go to work, you get up, you go to work. And unless something really pushes you, you just kind of keep going down that path because that's the path.
Absolutely. Yeah, and after a while, obviously, the job is quite, being a manager in a call center is incredibly stressful. It's I was managing around about 15 to 20 people at times, which can be really hard. And when you're a manager, and particularly of a large group of people, you're kind of part manager, part social worker. A lot of things that you don't want come into the office, that and that's kind of your duty of care to make sure that these people are okay. But it was becoming more and more stressful. So I knew at that point then, a bit further down the line, that I really then had to start making some kind of decisions on what I wanted to do. And I felt that I probably needed to make quite a drastic career change from what I was in. When you're in a job you really don't like and you become quite stressed out, the target is, well, I need another job. Sometimes that mindset's not particularly helpful, because you're just thinking, well, I need another job because I hate this job too much.
Yes.
You probably don't think rationally about, well, actually, what do I really want to do?
Yeah.
That was where I was at, really. So I had by 2012, 13, I was kind of at a point where I was like, well, I really, really do need to sort myself out. So I went on holiday. So I went to the American South. So I went to New Orleans, Memphis, and Nashville. And as soon as I got to New Orleans, I kind of felt, a bit more calm, a bit more chilled out. It's not something you associate with New Orleans, calmness and being chilled out. But I kind of felt like, it was a good time for me to sort of think about my career. And I think when you go on a vacation or a holiday, that's a good time to sort of think personally about what you want to do. It's no coincidence. I think a lot of people sort of switch jobs in summer because they kind of go away and they think, well, am I happy with what I'm doing? You don't have that stress on top of you, do you? Of well, what do I want to do? So I got to New Orleans and I sort of sat down in the hostel the one day and I sort of thought, well, do you know what? I really, it's a good time to think about what I want to do.
Mhm.
And again, I think I was still stuck with, well, what do I want to do? I think a good tactic is probably to just think of it back to front. Think about what you don't want to do. That's
Mhm.
always a good way to think about things. At that point, I was like, I don't want to work in a people-facing job. I don't want to have to face customers every day. I
Mhm.
don't want to have to particularly manage people. I still have a lot, I still enjoy the tech side of
Mhm.
things. A tech career is well paid. A tech career's got, good prospects. I was visiting America quite a bit. I was like, wow, if I've got a job as a tech company, I might be able to sort of, emigrate to somewhere else, like in
Mhm.
America or Australia or Canada. So I started to sort of formulate in my head, well, maybe I should look into maybe becoming a software engineer or something within the tech industry. So, when I left New Orleans, I got on a Greyhound, and that's a good, 7-8 hour drive on a Greyhound, middle of the afternoon. Got the Wi-Fi on the Greyhound. So I thought, well, I'm going to sit there for a few hours, and I'm going to start doing a little bit more research, think about what do I need to do this? Because, I was starting to sort of feel the vibe that I didn't need a computer science degree.
Mhm.
And I think that's quite a sort of typical approach and typical entry into the tech industry. You need a computer science degree, and I didn't
Mhm.
have that, but I knew that I had time I could learn in my own free time, and I knew that I'd be able to commit time to that. I'd have a bit of discipline to do that. So
Mhm.
on the Greyhound, I sort of sat down. I started to think about the sort of coding languages that I could possibly learn. What was in demand,
Mhm.
what would be useful, what's prevalent, what's upcoming, what's well paid. These were the kind of questions I was asking myself. And I settled on that I enjoyed using mobile phones. So I thought, well, I'm gonna think about building things in Android,
Mhm.
Android soft, so that at that time it was in Java. So I had my holiday, I had a great time, flew back, bought myself a laptop, started to download some stuff because there's so many
Mhm.
like free resources that I could start with. I bought a couple of books. So I bought a book called I think it was The Idiot's Guide to Java, or it
Yeah.
was Java for Dummies.
Yeah.
You're literally at ground zero. This is where we're going to start. And it was kind of like, well, okay, this is it. So I started to learn from that book,
Mhm.
but I wasn't really learning. I was just kind of parrot fashioning the code from the book
Mhm.
onto my laptop. And I think at that point, I kind of had another real kind of revelation, really, that actually you need to really explore different learning methods. What might suit you well at high school or college or
Mhm.
university, it might not suit you now. It was 10, 15 years on from the last time I'd really been in any kind of education.
Mhm.
And my favorite subjects at school were always history. History's a great thing because you get a book, you read it, you memorize the dates, you memorize the time, you memorize the people involved in the incident, and you do an exam and you just write it down, don't you?
Yeah.
It's just a case of passing one memory from a book onto a sheet of paper, really, and you give your opinion.
Mhm.
This is this, and this may have changed this, but that's really, So I was those kind of sort of subjects I was really good at.
Yeah.
But this was different. This was going to mean, you had to think logically. You had to start
Mhm.
thinking in a way that, and a different mindset to how you maybe thought before. So I started to look at different ways of learning. So I started to look at sort of, YouTube channels that would,
Mhm.
I could follow along with a tutorial that might, reinforce my learning better. I started to look at like online courses that I, maybe dismissed before. And one of the things I was really like enjoyed doing was I started to sort of do sort of websites that were built around gamification. So if you
Mhm.
did a particular challenge, you got points, and that would then
Mhm.
drive you on to think more about the next challenge. And those were real kind of things that pushed me on really. There was a
Yeah.
great website called Programming by Doing, which was by a guy at an American high school who just basically posted all of the challenges he gives his students, and with varying sort of levels of kind of
Yeah.
difficulty. And that then got me thinking, well, in my head, I started to logically think about these things. Sometimes you'd wake up in the
Mhm.
night and have this revelation, oh, now I have to solve that challenge. And it's like, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, Stu, go back to bed. But, you started to sort of think a little bit more
Yeah.
logically, and you started to think a bit more about that kind of mindset. And I think sometimes, when you may be learning things and you on your own and it's home learning,
Mhm.
because if you're going to change careers, sometimes you have to acknowledge that I'm going to have to put some time in outside of work.
Yeah.
You might, if you need a qualification, for example, a certificate, or you need things that you can justify to your next employer, these are things that, I can do, then, you're going to have to put that time in outside of work. So, explore those different kind of learning routes. It might be that what suited you, as I said, in college or high school or university now might not be the same, and time's moved on. It's not, when as I said, when I was at university, the internet was such a young thing. You didn't get, video streaming, you did, to a level where you could sit and watch it and it wouldn't, flicker and crash out. So, it's revolutionized the way, not only that we work, but it's also it should revolutionize the way we learn as well.
Well, and especially as you're thinking about the way you learned in school, that was, facts you had to do in order to pass a class. This is now something that you are going to use day to day, that you are, impacting a business and helping yourself grow and help your team. And there's so much more to it than just regurgitating information. So that may have been how you learned to pass a test, but this is now a whole different application of the learning too.
Absolutely, completely right. And that was a real good, that was on my journey. That was one of the things I really noticed that was important, that you don't dismiss other kind of learning channels and methods just because you've never done them before. You'll be surprised at what you can learn and how you learn it. And that was good. So I got to about sort of 20 sort of 15, 16, and I was still kind of learning at home. I just kind of committed myself, and I'd always think about things like, what resources have I got to offer myself? How much time can I commit in a day to do something? So, when I first started to plan this journey, I thought, well, I can probably give an hour a day, realistically in my free time, because everybody's got commitments. I couldn't just sit and say, well, I'm going to code for 4 hours a night, because nobody realistically can do that. I mean, you can, but you've come home from work, you have something to eat, you maybe have kids, or you maybe, you've got hobbies, and you've got a wife or a partner. You can't just say, well, I'm going to just sit in my room and code for 4 hours. So I thought, well, I can commit an hour a day. So I was working around about an hour a day where I could. But coding on your own, you don't really have that kind of you don't have that feedback and that recognition that you need, from maybe a mentor to say, Stu, this is really good. Have you thought about this? So I was still learning, but I think my learning had kind of started to slow down a little bit. And around that time, I was still in the job I was in, and I'd really hit a glass ceiling in that job. The next kind of role that I could have gone for in that company would have been a relationship manager role or a client services role. And for me, that just didn't fit with my kind of personality. I didn't feel that would be a role that I would enjoy. I've got friends that do the role, and they're certainly more kind of confident than me. They're a bit more outgoing than me. They've got that more of that gift to sort of talk to sort of clients. And I just felt that was not a role that I could do. So I kind of got to a point where I kind of needed to sort of rethink a little bit about what I was going to do. And so I started to research kind of coding boot camps. Coding boot camps now are kind of quite common. You can pretty much go to a coding boot camp in any country in the world now. They're kind of quite an intensive 16, between 8 to 16 week course. You'll learn the basic skills. Most of them quite a lot of them are kind of for profit. So that was one thing that I noticed when I started to research. That there was an obstacle in place, really, which was cost. A coding boot camp would cost, it would cost between $8,000 to sort of $15,000 on average. In English money, it's similar. £10,000, and I just couldn't commit to that, and that was a real obstacle for me at that point. So I kind of thought about, well, what can I do? What's the options? And around that time, I was very lucky. I was kind of at work. I'd just done a meeting with a member of staff. It wasn't a particularly great meeting, and I was sitting in an area of my office which is away from everybody because it's a confidential meeting. But there's a computer there, and I was kind of just writing up the report that from the staff. And I thought, well, I'm just going to have a look online, because I've really got to start, maybe taking a little bit more of a risk, because, when you change careers, it's a big risk. And, you're going from somewhere where you're very comfortable, everybody. I'd been there for, 10 years. I had some really good friends in that office, but at the same time, I wasn't really deep down happy.
Yeah.
So I went online. I just typed in coding boot camps Birmingham, and just out of sheer chance, like the School of Code came up, which was a boot camp which was like, you know, in my own city. It was free, which was like, wow, this is amazing. So School of Code's run by a guy called Chris Mia, whose mission really is to get more people into tech from backgrounds that wouldn't normally go into tech. So people who are, you know, ethnic minorities, women, people who had, you know, quite a varied career and maybe were a little bit later in their stages of their career. So it's a really, really good, you know, really good thing to do. And it was just such a sort of moment for me of thinking, well, I need to apply for this. But at the same time, it was like, I've got nothing to lose. You know, there's nothing for me to lose here, because you know, one, it's free, and you know, I'm at a point now where I'm going to just take the risk. You know, I'm sure I can survive for 4 months without a salary if the you know, the rewards outweigh the risk. So I applied, and it was quite mad really, because I went for the first stage, didn't really think much of it. Went for the second stage, and I said I had no pressure on me this time. It wasn't like I was going for a job where I was like, I've got to get out of this job. It was, I'm just going to go for a job and just see how it goes. And you know, I got to the sort of like the telephone interview, and I was like, well, you know, just spoke on the phone for half an hour, and you know, it was sort of great. You know, thanks so much. Yeah, you know, hopefully hear from you soon. Bye. You know, I didn't get anything out of it. And then it was like, you know, well, you're down to the final 50 now, and I was like, oh wow, you know, I've gone from 400 applicants to 50, and it was like, oh wow. Now, and I think by that, then I was like, well, now I really want this. I've gone from I don't know, you know, you never know, you know, let's just see how it goes. So I really want this course. So, you know, I turned up on the day. It was a kind of team building exercise and an interview, and I got onto the course, and then it was, you know, it was absolutely brilliant. You know, I left my job, and then I started on the course, and it's really intense. The boot camp's a really intense thing. You know, you're learning every day, and it can be tough at times, because you know, you sometimes you feel you're ahead, sometimes you feel behind, but it was really good, because it just also taught me a lot of other skills which I'd maybe not realized that, you know, were useful as well. So I learned more about all kind of team dynamics. So I did like the Myers-Briggs test, which was, you know, previously to that course, you know, being honest, I would have maybe looked at that and just thought, you know, that's the kind of sort of thing. That's the kind of sort of thing we would have done in our old job, where they would have kind of said, let everyone sit down, let's do the Myers-Briggs test. It wouldn't have gone any further. It wouldn't have, you know, impacted how we work as teams. It was just kind of something to say, well, we know this is what we do in our organisation. So, but I actually felt like it was a much more positive experience. You know, I learned more about me as a person in terms of how I work in a team. You know, so I'm a debater, so that I came out as someone who likes to, you know, argue, not necessarily argue, but I've always got a point of view on something. As you probably hear from my as we talk now. I'm all, you know, so it was really good to kind of understand, well, actually I'm gonna naturally maybe clash with people that aren't the same as me, that maybe don't like that kind of, you know, deep, you know, communication. And so that was really, really good to do as well. And it was all, you know, really good things to learn on the course. And I think as we discussed, when we discussed, you know, before we came on here, it's soft skills you sometimes really dismiss as a really important thing, but they're so important, aren't they? You know, they're such an important thing.
It can even lead into what kind of company you want to go to. So let alone is it good self-awareness for yourself, but if you were applying for a company where, I'm going to be extreme for a reason, but you know, the boss says, so therefore you do, so shut up and do. If you know that is not who you are, it's really helpful to know, well, that may not be the right company or team or culture for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, like communication and soft skills are just so important. And I think I said, a lot of people probably don't realize that you know, how relevant they are. And they're things like you said yourself, they're things you can't teach really. They're not things you can maybe sit in a room and go, this is how to communicate well. They come from trial and error. You know, You might be, you might work on the till at McDonald's. You've got
Hmm.
some great soft skills there.
Yeah.
You've learned, you're probably conflict resolution. You communicate well. You've got good team dynamics. You're going to work
Hmm.
well in a team. So straight away, those things are really important, and you should never kind of put them down as a, well, oh, they're just, they're nothing. They're so important as well to
Yes.
make it, to make you into a good person in your career.
Absolutely. Well, and especially coming from a client services background in a call center, I would
Yeah,
imagine a lot of those skills you built over the years, which is another reason why I always say never put down where you came from, because it helped you get to today and you're bringing it forward, even if it's not the
absolutely.
exact career.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, you don't. People who work in a call center, those skill sets are so, they're things that you can go and do anywhere else in other jobs. And the job I've got now, one of the reasons I got that job is because I have got a customer service
Hmm.
experience. And although I'm not on the phones and I'm talking to people, I obviously have an understanding of what maybe customers want. So
Hmm.
that's something that gets built into our UI and our UX design, because you think about, well, actually, what do customers want?
Yeah.
How do customers want to react with our business? So those are really important things.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you wrapped up the boot camp, were you able to find work pretty quickly? Like, especially in
Yeah,
the UK, is the boot camp a great way to get
yeah,
a next
yeah,
job?
definitely. And I think if you speak to people in the industry now, I think there's a consensus that the boot camp is a great way of recruiting,
Hmm.
staff, because they're computer science degrees, although they're really important. I would never say to someone, don't do a computer science degree unless if you really want to do one. They do teach a lot that initially you probably won't need when you go into a
Hmm.
boot camp. That it's boot camps are not just about, like, learning to code. It's the mindset is about how to solve a problem. How
Yeah.
can you solve a problem? How do you break a problem down? How do you think about a problem in a way of, well, this is a massive problem, but how can I break this down into smaller problems? Because once you
Hmm.
start to solve the smaller problems, the big problem is solved almost automatically. So yeah, I was really lucky. As soon as I finished the course, I applied for some jobs, and I got straight into a job. So I'd finished the course in sort of, we did a presentation in June, and by the start of July I was in a role.
That's
So
great.
yeah, it was an amazing experience, the boot camp. And I can't thank Chris and that boot camp enough, really, for
Yeah.
changing my career. Um, and yeah, so I'm now in a role at a company called Bravissimo, which is a woman's clothing company,
Hmm.
and it's going really, really well. The skills that I learned over the last sort of 6 or 7 years have put me in good stead to develop. And it's great because the industry is always moving. You never stand
Hmm.
still. There's never a boring day. You're always learning something. And even if you feel like you haven't learned something, if you kind of sit back, and I always say this to people when they talk to me about code, or they're talking to me about their job. Sometimes I say to people, if at the end of every day you sat down for 1 minute and you actually thought about what you've done that day, I guarantee
Hmm.
you've learned something. I guarantee you'll have probably picked something up that you didn't learn the day before. So never, in tech, that's certainly the case. You'll
Yeah.
always be learning. If you sit down at the end of a day, for 1 minute, you will see that you've learned something. And even if it's something small, those small things will build into a
Yeah.
greater understanding of the discipline.
That is awesome. Well, I love it when people find the path and the way to get to the thing they want to do. It's the first step is figuring out what you want to do, but then there's usually some work to get there. And that's often the place where people get lost, because it does take some work. And like you said, you can't always give 4 hours. You may have to get creative and may have to find something that's free because maybe you can't afford to do some big class or something, but there is a path to get there. So as you think about, you've shared a lot of great advice along the way. Is there any one thing that you want to make sure people take away from, or one thing that they can do differently tomorrow based on your journey?
Um, I think it's important to really understand what you want to do. Really, I think
Mhm.
it's important to have. And as I said, you don't have to know exactly what you want to do. As I said, think of it back to front. If you're not exactly sure what you want to do, if someone says to you, "Well, what do you want to do?" Certainly, if you're like 18 years old, that's such a broad question. I mean, what do you want to do? I mean, even at 25, you might think, "Well,
Yeah.
still don't really know what I want to do." But when you start to get those experiences, start to think, actually what I don't want to do, that would be my point, and once you know what you want to do, then you've got a plan. You can then start thinking about a plan. As I said, think about the resources you've got. In my eyes, you've got two resources. You've got time and you've got money. So if you've got, how much time can you commit to something? If you can commit 2 hours, that's great. If you've got money as well, in an ideal world, if you wanted to change careers and you had 7.5 hours a day and £20,000, you can pretty much, you can change careers quite quickly. But if you don't, and you don't have that kind of advantage, then it's going to take a little bit of time. Don't get disheartened at which, if on the way you think, well, I've been doing this for 4 months, I don't feel like I've learned loads. Review where you are and think about things. And certainly with tech, getting into tech is not the kind of struggle that people might think it is. You might look at some of the big companies like Google and Amazon who are asking for huge things to start with. But if you want to maybe get into a startup or a smaller tech company, that you can do it without a computer science degree. Go along to tech meetups in your local cities. See people, network. Really important. If you go to every city will have tech meetups. Go along to them and talk to people. Again, one of the things I learned on the bootcamp was about networking. I used to think networking was a kind of, very stereotypical idea of people in suits handing out business cards and telling each other how much money they earn. But it really isn't, it's not like that. Go along and talk to people, because these people are your ears and eyes into those industries. They'll be able to give you some great advice. From my point of view, when I used to go to tech meetups, I'm asking questions about where you work. I'm asking what tech you use, because if they're using cutting edge tech and you can get onto that cutting edge tech, when you hand your CV in at a place and they say, oh, wow, you use React, that straight away puts you in advantage that someone who doesn't. And maybe that's another thing that's good about boot camps, is they move with what employers want, whereas a computer science degree, maybe they'll give you the discipline, but they may not be able to give you everything you need for that. And so, those are certainly things I would say. Just get yourself out there and take the risk. It's important that you have to accept that if you're going to change careers, there's going to be an element of risk, and don't be afraid to take that risk, because the rewards will probably outweigh the kind of how you feel now if you're in a career that you don't want to be in.
Yeah, it is definitely worth the wait once you make the change. I know when you're in it, you're like, I just can't. I just want to make this change. Please have this happen now. Your mind is like already gone to the new place now that you've made the decision, but it's worth the work. It's worth the wait, because when you do get to that other spot, you're so much happier.
Oh, absolutely. And you'd be amazed that when you're in a job you don't want to be in, how much of that bleeds into maybe your personal life and, your relationships and relationship with your friends. And your mental health. There was times where I was, I didn't realize it, but I was probably quite, I was mentally not in the best of places. And it's very hard, as I said, when to sort of see through that sometimes, if you're, under stress or you're suffering from anxiety. So it's absolutely. You might feel at this moment in time, in the middle of a career change, or you're thinking about what you want to do. It's very daunting, but as I said, break it down, think about what you need, think how much time you can commit to it, and you will get there. It just takes time and perseverance.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing some great advice. I love having people on who, have gone through jobs that lots of people are in and, have found new paths. So thank you again for sharing all your, learnings along the way and telling your story.
Karen, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast.
Great. Thank you. Thank you again to Stuart for sharing his story on how he got unstuck from his path in client support and took a leap to change careers. I hope today's conversation helped inspire you. And if it did, please consider subscribing to this podcast, sharing it with others, and leaving a rating and review on the platform of your choice. And don't forget to check out my Teachable course. Listeners get a 20% discount with the code HAMSTER. Until next time, remember, there's always a way to get off the hamster wheel.